It was just another ordinary day in the life of a young couple, Alex and Lily. They were out camping in the woods, enjoying the beauty of nature and the peace and quiet of the outdoors. They found a small clearing to set up their tent, and they started a fire to keep warm. As the night fell, they heard strange noises in the woods. It sounded like footsteps, but there was no one around. They tried to ignore it and went to bed, hoping to get a good night's sleep. But the noises didn't stop. In the middle of the night, they heard a voice calling out their names. It was a soft, gentle voice, but it sent shivers down their spines. They thought it might be a hiker who had gotten lost, so they got out of their tent and looked around. But there was no one there. The couple went back to bed, but they couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them. They heard more noises, and the voice came back, calling out to them in a whisper. They started to panic, realizing they were lost in the woods with no way to escape. As they tried to find their way back to the main trail, they saw strange lights in the distance. It was a flickering orange glow, like a fire or a torch. They followed it, hoping to find someone who could help them. The lights led them to a small clearing in the woods. There, they saw a group of people dressed in old-fashioned clothes, holding torches and standing in a circle. They were chanting in a language they couldn't understand, and they were performing some kind of ritual. The couple tried to leave, but they were spotted by the group. They were captured and brought to the center of the circle. The group continued their ritual, and the couple felt like they were being sucked into a dark, terrifying void. When they woke up, they were back in their tent, safe and sound. They couldn't explain what had happened, but they knew that they had escaped something evil in the woods. They packed up their things and left the campsite, vowing never to return to that cursed place. From that day on, they lived with the memory of the strange woods, the voice that called out to them, and the group of people who were performing a dark and ancient ritual. They knew that they had narrowly escaped a fate worse than death, and they were grateful to be alive. But even after they left the woods, strange things continued to happen. They heard whispers in their sleep, felt cold hands on their skin, and saw shadows in the corners of their eyes. They couldn't shake the feeling that something was following them, something that had been unleashed by the group in the woods. They tried to forget about it, but the memories haunted them. They couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, and couldn't live a normal life. They felt like they were slowly losing their minds, trapped in a nightmare that would never end. Years went by, and they thought they had finally escaped the horrors of the woods. But one day, as they were driving through a remote part of the country, they saw a sign that made their blood run cold. It was a sign for the same campsite they had visited years ago, the same campsite where they had encountered the group in the woods. They couldn't believe it. They thought the campsite had been abandoned, but there it was, as if waiting for them. They knew they had to face their fears, to go back and see if the group was still there, to finally put an end to the nightmare that had been haunting them for so long. They parked their car and made their way through the woods. They felt a familiar sense of unease. They heard the same strange noises, the same whispers, and the same voice calling out their names. But this time, they were prepared. They had brought weapons and flashlights, ready to face whatever was waiting for them. As they approached the clearing, they saw the same flickering lights and heard the same chanting. They knew they had found the group again. They hesitated for a moment, wondering if they should turn back and leave, but their curiosity got the better of them. They stepped into the clearing, and the group turned to face them. The members of the group were dressed in the same old-fashioned clothes, and they were still chanting in the same language. But this time, there was something different about them. They looked older, more haggard, more twisted. Alex and Lily raised their weapons, ready to defend themselves. But the group didn't attack. Instead, they just stood there, staring at the couple with empty, soulless eyes. And then, without warning, they started to dissolve, turning into dust and blowing away on the wind. Alex and Lily were left standing in the clearing, bewildered and confused. They didn't know what had happened or why the group had disappeared. But they knew one thing for sure: they were finally free from the nightmare that had been haunting them for so long. They left the woods, feeling a sense of relief and joy that they hadn't felt in years. They drove back to their home, determined to leave the past behind them and start a new life together. But even as they settled back into their normal routine, they couldn't forget the strange events that had occurred in the woods. They knew that they would never be able to fully escape the horrors of that night, but they were grateful for the chance to finally confront their fears and put an end to the nightmare that had been haunting them for so long.